Let's talk about space colonies. There's quite a few interesting things I'd like to mention. First, there's a game called Cat Interstellar. It's free and it's only an hour long, but it's a neat looking walking simulator set on Mars where you play a robot called Dog during a robot operated mission to make Mars habitable. You also play a cat at one point. But if you look at the reviews, you'll see that they often have a sort of reaction to the game because it ends kind of abruptly. But if you know that going in, you'll find the experience at least interesting, especially since it doesn't cost anything but the time and the bandwidth to download it, plus the hour to play it through. So if you're wondering where the footage that's playing underneath my audio, or over my audio is playing over. If you're wondering where that footage is coming from, it's from Cat Interstellar. Though at some point, I suddenly ended up in ancient Egypt fighting aliens and skeletons. But that may have had something to do with me starting up Serious Sam: The First Encounter after the game ended. But no, it's probably unrelated. Anyway, so if you have any advice or suggestions for how to improve my videos, I would super appreciate it. If this video ends up meeting the bar of about worth the time that you invested watching it, please like it. But, you don't have to, whatever. Or wait, no. Yes, please do like it. Anyway. That said, I'll briefly cover the stuff I found out about how humans might live in space. Then I'll link to some interesting sources. Beyond just plain interest in this kind of thing, I'm working on a murder mystery set in space. So, I might reference my own extrapolations based on these subjects. Or I might not. Who knows? Watch to find out. So, first, humans need proteins. And many people eat meat. However, in space, no one can burn rainforests for ranching and other things. Gosh, that'll become a dated reference, one way or another. Yay! I was a bit facetious just now, but the point is that it's going to be difficult to have farms on the moon, or on Mars, or on space stations. It would take quite a bit of space. Get it? And resources. Not to mention the concerns of shipping thousands of livestock into space and to the colony. Shipping preserved meat into space is technically an option, but probably a little far from the most efficient use of time and resources, especially when there's a better option: 3D printing your meat. Yep, people have been working on ways to artificially grow meat, and recent progress has demonstrated on the International Space Station. One of the articles I found on this quoted comments from somebody from Asgardia, a micronation, i.e. a small group that call themselves a country. Specifically, the Asgardians are a group of people who want to create their own country in space. They're pleased with this development, which makes sense. After all, if you can grow a piece of food you want, that'll ideally take less time, resources, and space than growing an animal and slaughtering it. The technology isn't yet advanced enough for mass production, but it's certainly promising. And I'm sure that the Asgardians would be happy to help us, since they need our aid to fight the replicators. Dated reference. This development suggests that any future or sci-fi habitat in space will artificially grow any meat needed for protein and culinary tastes. This means that even large space colonies wouldn't need livestock, so any plants and animals would be for other purposes, such as aesthetics, or to bring a little piece of Earth's habitats with you to space. I guess that rules out space ranchers with spacesuit-wearing cattle on the moon, herding them with the help of robot cowboys. That wasn't going to be in my mystery, but I'm still somehow disappointed. Going back to Asgardia, once self-sufficient or semi-self-sufficient space habitats are possible, then we can probably expect that there's going to be some people who are going to want to live in those places instead of Earth. Some of those people, for example, Asgardia, may want to create their own space nations independent to the laws of Earthlings. Of course, even a truly self-sufficient space colony, not necessarily a given, would still have social, economic, and other ties to Earth. For instance, it would be a rare group who'd have both the resources to create their own self-sufficient space colony and would willingly cut off all ties to Earthbound friends and family, several ties to their former homes and sports teams and social groups and such, and completely divest themselves of any Earthbound properties and investments. That said, in a hypothetical future or sci-fi story, you could have some extremely isolationist group do that and leave for Mars or the outer solar system. Their long-term success would be dependent on a host of factors, but someone could certainly try, even if they don't succeed. Also, comfort could be an issue for early colonies, but if enough resources are put into the space colony, such as if a wealthy investor wants to create a luxury habitat, maybe a Las Vegas in space, or a giant sombrero city or something, it could eventually be at least possible. Another dated reference. However, gravity would always be a concern. So far as I've gathered, artificial gravity like in Star Trek, Star Wars, and Spaceballs doesn't necessarily look like it's scientifically possible. Some method may eventually be discovered or invented, but probably only in the far future. This means that we have to fake gravity in other ways. If you've ever been in a bus, a car, or a roller coaster that's made a turn and you felt a tug to the outside of that turn, then you'll understand how we can simulate Earth-like gravity elsewhere. That tug's the centrifugal force, and it's essentially the outward tug from turning and spinning. Basically that, but writ large and built to prevent nausea and things like that, is how we can fake the gravity for space colonies. There's more to it than that, but this is the basic idea. I'm not the person to explain this in super detail. It's the concept behind the science fiction idea of the O'Neill cylinder, where you build a space station that's a cylinder, as the name implies, only one that's really, really big. Then you spin it so that the centrifugal force tugs everyone out enough that they can walk along the inside of the cylinder with what feels like Earth's gravity. Then people can live inside the cylinder and even have gardens and parks there too. That's the gist. Well, that and something at either end of the cylinder to keep the air inside. An important detail you should remember if you ever end up building one. But this idea can be used for more than just spinning space stations. It can also be used for spinning cities. See, places like Mars, the Moon, and asteroids have less gravity than the Earth. Gravity is really important because it tells your muscles, blood, and bones how to react and behave. In total weightlessness, this can lead to bone loss and atrophy, among other issues. Since places like Mars would have some gravity, this effect would be lessened, but we don't really know by how much or what the long-term consequences would be. Mars is rather far from Earth, meaning that astronauts and colonists would be on their own if any health problems did arise, regardless of their cause. While things like atrophy may not be immediate problems for the astronauts while they're in those low-gravity environments, it would definitely be a concern if they ever wanted or needed to come back to Earth. Working out extensively and possible future drugs can mitigate or prevent these problems, and so solutions are possible. Further, since bone loss in astronauts seems similar to how bone loss occurs with old age, research by NASA and others to solve this problem may come to benefit everyone, which is a pattern with NASA. But returning to the workouts and drugs thing, while exercise is healthy, needing to take some cocktail of drugs while you're in low gravity may not be the best long-term solution. Even the safest drugs will have side effects for some people, so maybe we should try for something else. There's also the comfort or preference issue people might have, too. Because, people might like to live in gravity conditions they spent their lives under. And they might want future generations born in space to experience Earth-like gravity as well, especially if it would be beneficial to those hypothetical future generations' possible health concerns. But that opens up a whole host of possible tangents for us to go down, so let's keep moving. As one of my sources says, an idea for a Martian colony has been proposed by an architecture student, where you build a city in a ring shape, where the city is on a gigantic maglev, and then you spin the city to create artificial gravity. This sounds pretty science fiction-y, so don't expect it to happen anytime soon. Still, it's a feat of engineering that could be theoretically possible at some point in the future. On the subject of Mars, here's something else. Mars has no magnetic field. The Earth's molten core creates a magnetic field, protecting every living thing on Earth from harmful cosmic radiation, specifically from the sun. This is not the case on Mars. Making things worse, Mars's atmosphere is thin, so that's not going to be any help either. Therefore, any sort of Martian colony would need to have radiation shielding. Thick domes would work, but it might be more practical to just excavate and build a colony under the surface, where the already existent dirt and rocks would provide the shielding for colonists. If there's any life on Mars, that might be where it is, safe underground, like our future Martian mole people colonies. If you're going to talk about restoring Mars's atmosphere somehow, then keep in mind that, first off, it would probably take a long time to do that, and second off, it wouldn't stop the radiation exactly. Instead, what might happen is that the atmosphere would slowly ablate away. So if we're talking about a long-term colonization of the planet that's going to take a long time anyway, then we're looking at the long-term view. And if the atmosphere is going to be, blown away over the long term, because this has happened before to Mars, apparently, then that's not really an actual solution to our problem. However, maybe you don't like the idea of building the colony underground. Maybe you don't like the idea of super thick dome cities. Maybe you want all of that red Martian dust getting blown into nooks and crannies. Well, there's a science fiction-y solution for you. Mars may not have a magnetic field anymore, and melting its core to create one may kind of be unlikely for various reasons. But you know what you yourself could make to generate a magnetic field? An electromagnet. It is within the realm of theoretical possibility that, in the not near future, a space station could be built to generate a magnetic field strong enough to shield Mars from the sun's harmful rays. The station could be put between the sun and Mars to create a kind of magnetic umbrella of sorts. That would be quite the feat of astral engineering, and you'd think that there'd still be the minor issue of radiation from other sources, though obviously radiation from outside the solar system would be much less. Still, if a single satellite could be built to protect against the sun, it raises the question of whether or not smaller versions could be built to cover other directions. Possibly, but even for whoever would end up hypothetically investing in Mars's magnetic umbrella, they may not think that that's worth however much such an investment would cost. By that point, genetic engineering could probably do the job of these extra umbrellas as well or better, and probably cheaper. Feel free to chime in if you think you know what you're talking about. Or even if you don't. Whatever. Also, spacesuits will probably be more flexible and maneuverable, since, being able to easily get up if you fall over is something that's always appreciated.